Welcome back, everyone. To finish out this section, we have two quick focus lessons on specific topics that we want to highlight. The first of which is going to take a closer look at working with forced tunneling when routing internet traffic on Azure. In this quick lesson, we're going to start off with an overview or a review of what is forced tunneling, which is a little bit of an expansion from our user-defined routes lesson. And then we're going to look at a specific scenario and the additional steps that are required to implement forced tunneling over a VPN connection. So jumping into it, as a quick review, forced tunneling can best be thought of as the idea of forcing your outbound internet traffic through some sort of a gatekeeper device or location, as opposed to just sending it directly out to the public internet. In these scenarios, that gatekeeper will be in charge of either inspecting or auditing outbound traffic before it goes out to the internet, and our typical gatekeeper devices or locations are usually either a network appliance, the Azure Firewall service, or a VPN network, typically working with an on-premises location. In our example off to the right, we have an Azure Virtual Network, which is connected over a VPN connection to an on-premises location, in which case we have custom routes set up in which all outbound internet traffic, instead of going out to the public internet, will instead be forced to go through that VPN connection to our on-premises firewall for firewall inspection and audits, and from there it is then routed to the outbound internet. Now, the key point we're going to focus on is that compared to network appliances or Azure Firewall, VPN forced tunneling requires an additional step, which we're going to talk about now. So let's talk about, from a high level, how do we implement forced tunneling over VPN? Well, a lot of it is going to be a repeat of the previous steps of setting up custom routes. First, we will create a custom route for our internet-bound traffic, again, all zeros, in which case our next hop will be a virtual network gateway, which correlates with our VPN connection. Now, quick side note, we have not yet talked about virtual network gateways in this course. However, for now, be aware that virtual networks gateways must be the route-based gateway in order for forced tunneling to work. From there, we will then go through the rest of our custom route setup process, in which we will assign that route table to relevant subnets from which we are going to route our internet-bound traffic. The next step is going to be our new step, in which when working with virtual network gateways over VPN, in addition to setting up custom routes, we also need to set a local gateway as a default site. Now, once again, we have not talked about VPN in this course yet. For now, understand that a local gateway is the remote VPN connection that we are assigning a default site to, again in this example, an on-premises location. Now, here's the main focus of this lesson. When setting a local gateway as a default site for forced tunneling, be aware that you can only do this via a PowerShell command. That's right, not Azure CLI, not the Azure portal. You can only use PowerShell to set your default site. And you also need to know that the PowerShell commandlet is a pretty long one. The command is set AZ virtual network gateway default site. Yep, that's a pretty long commandlet. To finish it out, when using that command, we need to assign the gateway default site as wherever our local gateway is, and then we also need to designate our host network virtual network gateway of whatever the name is of our virtual network gateway. And finally, be aware that this process of setting a default site applies to VPN connections only. If we are using ExpressRoute as opposed to VPN, you do not need to go through this default site process. VPN only in this case. With that, it's going to conclude our quick overview of working with VPN connections to implement forced tunneling over Azure routing. To quickly review our key takeaways, we reviewed what exactly is forced tunneling, which is again the process of forcing internet-bound traffic through some sort of a gatekeeper, and we also learned that forced tunneling through VPN does require an extra step. We then covered how to implement forced tunneling over VPN, which includes the usual steps of creating a route table, creating an internet-bound route through a remote VPN network, associating our subnet with a route table, and then the additional step, again only in PowerShell, in which you need to set a default site for that routing setup, which is again associated with the local gateway, or in other words, the remote VPN site we are tunneling through. That's going to go ahead and wrap things up. Let's move on to the next lesson.